What's up, my friend? Abby here, and welcome back to Writer's Life Wednesdays. What the heck? It's another month again, and that means I'm kicking off a new series on this channel. It's going to be all about outlining a riveting novel. Over the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be revealing my outlining process start to finish, and basically how I take a messy story idea, or plot bunny, if you will, and turn it into a roadmap that is easy to follow. Basically a game plan that will turn my messy ideas and make them into a coherent and riveting novel that people will fall in love with. Now, it's important to remember that your outline is your roadmap of character arcs, and your character arcs are basically your story. Because, you've heard me say this a lot, story is not about what happens, it's about how what happens affects and transforms the characters. So the characters are at the heart of everything, which is why we're going internal with this outlining method. Not so much what happens, although it will include that. It's mainly going to take what happens and make it significant to the characters so that the reader cares. So we're not just outlining what happens here, we're outlining why it matters and how it affects and transforms the characters. If you know me at all, you know I am a plotter, not a pantser. I gravitate towards knowing exactly where I'm going and exactly why. Before I write a novel, I usually write a 15 to 20,000 word outline of everything that happens in the story. Plus, I also write scene cards for pretty much every single scene. I know. I'm a little crazy, but this is what works for me. But don't freak out, this series is not gonna be about how I write a detailed synopsis or anything like that, because I realize that might not be your thing. This is going to be about outlining a novel using a tried and true, brilliant method. That is the 3-act story structure. You might have heard of the 3-act story structure before, and if you have and you don't like it or you don't like the sound of it, please hear me out. Because I didn't like it when I first discovered it. But that was because I didn't really understand it, and I didn't see the reason why you should abide by some constricting structure to write your story. I mean, writing is an art, right? And there's no right or wrong way to do that, correct? Well, yes and no. You're free to write however you want to, create however you want to, but to me, there's two types of creation. Creating for yourself and creating for others. When you create for others, you're still creating something from your heart, but you're looking at it from their perspective. You're keeping them in mind. You're thinking, what is going to interest them and engage them about my thing? How am I going to make them care about my thing? When you're creating for others, you're not bastardizing your art, but you want other people to fall in love with it. When you create for yourself, you couldn't care less. I mean, you want your art to be good, great even, but if nobody likes it, you don't care. It's just there to make you happy. You create it because it makes you happy. The finished product makes you happy, and if somebody else likes it, their like is just extra. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have it both ways. I believe that you truly can create for yourself and others at the same time, because you're in love with what you're doing, but you also have this goal of you want other people to be in love with it too. You know what I mean? So there are some things that I create just for myself, such as my music. A lot of people don't know this, but I'm also a musician. I create and mix and record my own music, and I know that it's a little weird and my voice will never be technically perfect, but it makes me happy, and I literally don't care if anybody else likes it. So, but with writing, it's a different story. No pun intended. Grown. Now, you might be that way with writing, like I am with my music. You just like writing, you don't care if anybody else likes it, you have your own style, your own way of doing things, and that's fine because you literally don't care if anybody else likes it or gets anything out of it. That's cool, do your thing. But see, when I create a story, for me, it's not about my flair or my style. It's about the reader. I want to touch the reader with something. I want to give them something. So when I go about writing a novel, I want to craft it in such a way that the reader can get the absolute most out of it. So if you're like me with writing, you want to do the same thing. You want to create a story that cuts right to the heart, that impacts your readers, that makes them fall in love with this story. And if you don't even know where to begin with this monumental task, that's where story structure comes in. I know it doesn't sound very exciting, but trust me, it is so exciting. So when I first discovered the 3-act story structure, I was like, really? Structure sounds so rigid and predictable. How do I know it even works? Well, what convinced me in the end is just noticing the story structures of stories that I really, really, really love. I urge you to do this. Next time you watch a movie or read a book that was just amazing, you're like, oh, that was so good. Don't just sit there and marvel about it like if it's some like freak of nature. It's not some miraculous thing, okay? It has a science behind it. Everything has a science behind it. And in this case, we're talking about brain science, what captures the attention and just plays on simple psychology. So I started doing this. I started taking my favorite books and TV shows and movies and just psychoanalyzed them and drew graphs and took notes and studied the crap out of them. And I started to notice something revolutionizing. They all followed the same basic structure, the 3-act story structure. So before we go any deeper into this, I just want to give you a quick look. I feel like I've been talking forever. So before we go any deeper into this, I just want to quickly show you the 3-act story structure, what it looks like at a glance. Here it is. So obviously you have the 3 acts, the beginning, the middle, and the end. Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3, otherwise known as the setup, the confrontation, and the resolution. In Act 1, the beginning of the story, we have the hook, the setup, the inciting incident, the build-up, and the first plot point, and the first pinch point. In Act 2, the middle of your story, we have the pre-midpoint reactionary hero, the game-changing midpoint or plot twist, post-midpoint action hero, and the second pinch point. In Act 3, the final act or the climax of your story, we have supposed victory, disaster, dark moment, recovery, climactic confrontation, victory, and the end and resolution. Now I know I just flew right through that, and that's because we're gonna talk about it more in depth, of course, but I just wanted you to get the general idea. This is not something that I made up, obviously. It is a popular, widely used story structure that a lot of really brilliant, best-selling, amazing, just go down in history books and stories and movies and TV shows follow. Now I know what you might be thinking. Isn't this too predictable? That's what I was worried about when I first heard about story structures. Like, if we know how they go, and we know that this story is following the story structure, then won't we be able to just guess everything that's gonna happen and therefore lose interest in the story? Short answer, no. Long answer, just think about it for a minute. Hundreds of, probably thousands, probably maybe even millions of stories have followed this story structure and garnered fans from all walks of life, all ages. Why? Because it's not so much a question of what's gonna happen. It's a question of how is it gonna happen? When your protagonist majorly messes everything up, most people who are reading your book aren't gonna be like, I wonder if he's gonna come to his senses and fix things. More likely, they're thinking, how is he going to come to his senses and fix things? We can often predict the ending of stories, right? When we watch a movie, we're like, I know this has a happy ending. We say that. But in the middle of the story's conflict, you can't see how this mess is gonna turn into a happily ever after. You just know it's gonna be happily ever after. And that does not take the surprise or intrigue out of it. Because you don't know how it's gonna end up being a happily ever after. That's where the intrigue comes in. That's what keeps us up past our bedtime. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm a very visual person. I have to see exactly how my story is laid out and where it's gonna go, what direction it's gonna take before I feel comfortable sitting down and writing it. Now I realize that you might be a pantser and you might not like outlining. You might just like flying by the seat of your pants and just doing whatever makes sense at the time, making it up as you go, or rewriting and fixing the whole story when it comes time to write your second draft. But I outline so that I don't have to write a second draft, okay? I never write a second draft because before I write my first draft, I pretty much perfected everything about the story before I write one word of the story. Now, obviously, this is just my crazy, hyper-organized way of doing things, and I understand if you don't like doing that, but I do recommend, even if you're a pantser, that you make a teensy tiny outline because it's gonna help you so much. I like to call it minimalist outlining, not outlining for minimalists, but if you're a minimalist, that's cool too. But I'm talking about outlining just enough so that you're not questioning yourself every 2 minutes, wondering if your book is absolute garbage. You'll know it's a good story, and that will give you the confidence to write it. For me, when I outline, it's just about knowing where I'm going and also giving myself the confidence to write the story because I know it's good. You won't be overwhelmed and constricted, but you also won't be doubting yourself and your story, and you will never, ever have writer's block. You ready for this? Me too. Now, I've been talking for way too long now, so I'm going to stop here, and next week, we're going to really get this party started and kick off this whole series, and I'm gonna take you on a deep dive into outlining your riveting novel. So episode 1 is gonna be all about Act 1, the beginning, the most crucial part of your story, because this is where you make the reader care and pull them in for the rest of the ride. I'm also going to debunk a common myth that most writers have about the inciting incident and reveal the one thing that makes most novel openings crash and burn before they even get started. Hint, it's a super easy thing to avoid if you know what it is, and I'm gonna tell you what it is in next week's video. Episode 2 is gonna be all about Act 2, the middle ground of your story. A lot of writers struggle with this part of the story because obviously your goal is to keep the reader interested and engaged. But how do you do that exactly? And how do you craft the perfect plot twist that will surprise your readers and addict them to the rest of the story? That's what we'll be discussing in episode 2. And finally, the last act, the climax of your story. In this third and final video, I'm gonna show you how to craft an emotional roller coaster of a crescendo that's unique to your story, but moving to anyone who reads it. I'm also going to show you how to focus on the internal and emotional battle of your characters so that you can have this climactic confrontation in your story, even if you write something like contemporary and there's not a lot of action and adventure going on. Remember that every story, regardless of genre, has to connect with the internal journey of your characters in order to make the reader care. And we'll talk about exactly how to do that in Act 3 of your story in this video. So if you want in on this whole series, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. It is gonna be good, my friend. I've been actually planning this series for a long time, so I'm very excited to show you all the gold in this outlining method so that you can make your story the best it can possibly be. Okay, that's it for me. If you're excited for this series, please smash that like button to let me know. Also, comment below and tell me, do you use the 3-act story structure? Have you used it for a long time? Are you a plotter, or are you a pantser, or a minimalist outliner? I'm gonna make you a minimalist outliner whether you like it or not. Are you excited for this series? Because I certainly am. Oh, also, if you're watching this in the future, I will have already finished posting this series, and the links to all the videos will be in the description box below. If you're watching this in real time, then you just have to wait. Until next week, my friend, rock on.